Hello guys and welcome back to Planet 40k. We've got another refresher review for you today, dictated by yourselves from the polls. So let me just quickly explain what refreshers are again in case you've just sort of joined us throughout this mini-series we'll be doing. It's not a full review, we're just kind of bringing ourselves back with the units, going through the unit itself and how it applies, or how the unit applies to the Pariah Nexus, or the current missions, the current deck, and all that kind of stuff. Now, we're doing 24-hour polls at the moment. We did a poll, and it was with the Canoptic Reanimator, the Skorpekh Lord, Triumph Praetorians, and the Ophidian Destroyers. The Skorpekh Lord won this poll with 40% of the vote. There was 850 votes there. So you've had your say. Now, we did also mention that there will be a comment of the day. So if you comment in this video, you might get chosen to be involved in the next video. So let's check one from the last video, Imatech the Stormlords video. We've got a comment from Warhammer 40k. I like to play Imatech on his own, guarding the home objective. It gives me at least 2 CP before the enemy will be able to kill him. And because he's on his own, they won't fully commit to it. So that's Warhammer 40k. He's actually a member, or they are actually a member. Speaking of membership, guys, if you want to become a member, click the join button down below. Admittedly, I have been sort of neglecting that area of my channel, so I want to sort of bump that back up again. And if you've got any ideas for perks for the members, let me know down in the comments down below. Of course, it has to be doable, but yeah, let me know down below. So let's talk about this Skorpekh Lord then. Let's get into how he now interacts with the Pariah Nexus and so on. So he has 80 points. He's got a movement of 8 inches, which is pretty fast for an infantry character. I mean, you look at Imatech the Stormlord or the Overlord, they're all moving sort of 5-6 inches or so. This is an 8-inch moving character. Toughness 7, again, when you're comparing to Imatech, who's toughness 5, it's very resilient. 3+ armor, 4+ invulnerable save, so the armor save isn't quite as good as someone like Imatech, but you've still got that 4+ invulnerable save to rely on. 7 wounds is pretty impressive when you compare that. Again, they're mainly 6 wounds, those kind of characters. Leadership 6+ and OC 2, whatever. Keywords, infantry, yep, goes through ruins and stuff, pretty cool. Character, not epic hero, so you can have enhancements if we need to. We'll talk about that later on. Destroyer cult, that will relate to the Annihilation Legion detachment. Again, we'll talk about that as well. And Skorpekh Lord. So that's all the basic stuff from the statistics. Of course, you've got the United in Destruction ability with lethal hits for the unit that you're going to be leading. You do have to be leading that unit in order to have this lethal hits ability active. If he is running solo, he's not leading in a unit. I think that's a bit of a weird words thing, but that's how it's written. And then you've got the Crimson Harvest. You're doing mortals on the charge, which is, I do forget that one. I always seem to forget these little rules that are quite a big importance to these certain characters. But yeah, you're doing a mortal wound bomb on the charge with the potential of D3+3 as well, which is really good in fact. That's before you've even done any melee attacks whatsoever. Let's talk about his weapons for a moment before we get into those Skorpekh Destroyers that he can be leading with lethal hits. You've got a range weapon, which is pretty crap to be honest with you. You've got 2 shots, maybe 4 shots within 9-inch range, and it's pipping off a couple of wounds on an intercessor or a couple of bugs, guardians and so on. You're not doing much with it, it's just added bonus. Then the Flensing Claw or the Hyperphase Harvester, depending on which one you want to go for. It's almost like having a sweep and strike profile, except they're 2 completely different weapons. You can't be using both of them, which you wouldn't be doing that anyway with strike and sweep anyway, so it's the same kind of thing really. You've either got 8 attacks, strength 6, -1 damage, so you're swiping away gaunts, or you're going for the Hyperphase Harvester, which is only 4 attacks, but you're now strength 10, -3 damage. So you're likely wounding that kind of stuff on 2s, even toughness 5 on 2s. Damage 3 should be all you need there, but the bigger stuff, the toughness 11, toughness 12, he will struggle a little bit against, but that's where it helps to have a unit with him. So speaking of which, he can be leading the Skorpekh Destroyers. Now this unit will be applying rerolls of 1s to hit, or on the charge it's going to be full rerolls, and that will apply to your Skorpekh Lord as well, because he's part of the unit. So they gain lethal hits from him, he gains the rerolls to hit from them, which is nice. There's also the Devastating Wounds ability that you can unlock with the plasma sight. It's only once per battle, so it's a one use only. If you've got a full unit of 6, you can have 2 of them, so that'll be twice per battle if you like. And again, that will interact with the Skorpekh Lord because he's a part of the unit. So you're going to have lethal hits and devastating wounds and re-rolling all your hit rolls and so on. So it's quite a nice combination. I know lethal hits and dev wounds doesn't quite go together, but at the same time, if you don't all get lethal hits and you just get normal hits, you've still got more chances of dev wounds. So it kind of works okay, to be honest. Now the questions that we've got to ask in this video particularly is, what unit size works best with the Skorpekh Lord? Does he work best in a unit of 6, a full unit? Does he work best in a unit of 3? Does he work best on his own? Or do you just leave him out completely and just let the Skorpekh Destroyers run on their own without a leader? Also, we need to ask ourselves what detachment works best with the Skorpekh Lord. Then you go on to the enhancements and stratagems and so on. But before we answer that question, just a little plug to a previous video we've done not that long ago, Skorpekh Destroyer Math Hammer. Now admittedly, one of the combinations that we didn't do was 3 Skorpekh Destroyers and a Skorpekh Lord. It wasn't really something I ever thought about doing, so yeah, that part of the maths isn't involved, but having a unit of 6 and having a unit without him is all in there. So if you want to check that video out after, there it is. Right, so let's get answering these questions then. Which unit size works best for the Skorpekh Lord? Now for me, a full unit of 6 is fantastic as a massive beat stick kind of unit. You've got the combination of mortal wounds on the charge, you've got the lethal hits, you've got the devastating wounds, you're re-rolling hit rolls, as we said, you've got a decent amount of AP on top of that, and a lot of attack, so it does clear out most enemy units. It is quite a large point sink though, and your opponent is not going to ignore it. It's going to have quite a large target on their back, so your opponent is going to want to deal with it. However, since it was brought to my attention taking a unit of 3 with the Skorpekh Lord, I think I favoured this more than having 6. It's only cheaper, it's 170 points now for 3 Skorpekh Destroyers and the Lord, so it's not big enough for your opponent to sort of lock eyes on and go, that's a target, because it's only 170 points. A Doomsday Ark is more, a Catan is more, Canoptic Wraiths are more, and so on. So they're not really a huge threat in your opponent's eyes, but they still do pack a punch. They still can go through ruins and charge through ruins, they can still get your lethal hits and your dev wounds and so on. They still get all the combination abilities that you do when having a Lord with the Destroyer. So it's still quite a good little punch, and that is probably my preferred method. I mean, you can still take like 2 lots of 3 and have 2 Skorpekh Lords and have the threat sort of in 2 different locations and still not be a massive threat to your opponent because, again, 170 points per unit. So you could opt to do that if you've got a few Skorpekh Lords ready to go. Now, one of the other options is having him run solo. Now, this does kind of bring me on to the next set of questions, but we'll talk about the detachments in a moment. But if you were to use the Awakened Dynasty, for example, you've got one of the enhancements, which is the Mythic Dermal Bond enhancement for 15 points. And you could put it on him because he's not an epic hero, he's just a standard character. So for 15 points, give a 4+ Funo Pain save, which makes him a little bit of a nasty little beat stick at, what, 80 points plus 15, 95 points. Having him run solo, 7 wounds, toughness 7, 4+ in run save, 4+ feel no pain save. That's a nasty little beat stick there that can run up the battlefield destroying little enemy units. Now, whether you're going solo, whether you're going with 3 Skorpekh Destroyers, whether you're going with 6 Skorpekh Destroyers, I think their main sort of reason for taking them, their sort of battlefield role, if you like, is to be taking out units that are within objectives, on objectives. Stopping your opponent from scoring primaries mainly. You can also delve into the secondaries, you know, blocking secondaries as well, but for me, they're jumping onto objectives, overwhelming force is a secondary in there, or no prisoners, just to kill stuff. But once it comes to your opponent's turn in their command phase, if they're not on that objective anymore, or they don't have the OC to hold that objective, you could be denying them 4 or 5, whatever amount of points it is for that particular objective. So that's what I feel like the battlefield role is for the Skorpekh Lord and his unit within the Pariah Nexus deck. They're not going to be really doing actions, they're not going to be going and doing established locust They're not really, I mean, they can do things like engage, I suppose, but they're not going to do any sort of action sabotage, things like that. That's not for them. You've got cheaper things to do that. Your Hexmark Destroyers can do that kind of stuff. Death Marks, Flayed ones if they're still alive, and so on. However, if you've got a single Skorpekh Lord running solo for 95 points with this enhancement, you could break into the action territory there because it's quite cheap and quite resilient, especially like recover assets and things like that, because he's likely to survive, especially if he's tucked in a ruin and he can't be seen. So yeah, when you're applying him to the Pariah Nexus deck, that's the kind of things I'd be doing. But if you are taking any Skorpekh Destroyers, I would advise taking a Skorpekh Lord with the unit. Having them run on their own I don't think is the best way. You're losing enhancement options, you're losing potentially detachment rules such as the Awakened Dynasty, the +1, you're losing lethal hits and mortals on the charge, which I think is quite important. Now, what detachment works best with the Skorpekh Lord and why? That's the next question. Now, as much as I think the Annihilation Legion sort of screams out to me to say this is the detachment for Skorpekh Destroyers and a Skorpekh Lord, I would rather go down the route of the Awakened Dynasty. The Awakened Dynasty, you instantly get a +1 to the hit roll if a unit's been led. There he is, he's leading the unit, so they're now going to be hitting on 2s, re-rolling 1s. You could be fishing for those lethal hits if you wanted to, or oddly you can do the reverse and kind of roll your 6s again to get more dice into the devastating wounds if you wanted to. I know that's a bit of a weird thing to do, but if you were going up against something that you didn't want to give them an armor save, maybe they've got a really good invulnerable save or something, go for dev wounds instead. Might be a better plan. But just your rerolls in general, if you're hitting on 2s, you're going to have a lot more confidence to reroll even if you've got a 5. If you've got a 5, it's not a lethal hit, you'll have more confidence to roll it again just to go for those 6s, because even on a 2+, you're still going to hit again anyway. So I think it just gives you more confidence with the rerolls in particular. Now, this detachment's got a few extra bonuses with stratagems and enhancements. I mean, you've got the Protocol of Eternal Revenant, so you can bring him back to life if he dies, which is cool. You've also got the Protocol of Hungry Void, which is huge for Skorpekh Destroyers and Skorpekh Lord in particular, because you get a +1 to your strength. That puts his Hyperphase Harvester to strength 11 and -4 AP. You could go further with that and get a Silent King in there to get it to strength 12 with one of his abilities, with his Triumph abilities. And yeah, that starts to get really nasty when it stacks up. And don't forget, this will also apply to the Destroyers as well. In terms of the enhancements with the Awakened Dynasty, you've got the Veil of Darkness. If you want to pop them across the battlefield, it will be a 9-inch charge, don't forget. But if you're doing it through Ruins, you're still fairly safe. Or the Netherrealm Casket enhancement for a -1 to its stealth. It's basically stealth, which is good because they're going to get shot at. And they can't really shoot back because they're just melee. So that's what I think in terms of the Skorpekh Lord. I mean, in terms of other detachments, like I said, the Annihilation Legion, I don't like using it. I don't think all the abilities and enhancements and stratagems are worthy enough to play. I don't think it's that competitive. Some people do really like it. The Hypercrypt Legion is okay, but you're going to have to do a 9-inch charge from reserves though, unless you give them Deep Strike, but it's still going to be a 9-inch charge. Unless you're using the Cosmic Precision stratagem, but then you can't charge because it doesn't allow you to charge. You've still got the option of a Monolith, I suppose, and then you've got to spend 2 CP to pop out and charge. That gets quite expensive. Monolith isn't cheap nowadays, and I don't tend to use Monoliths with the Hypercrypt Legion, which is the detachment I actually play. So yeah, I would stick with the Awakened Dynasty with the Skorpekh stuff, and every now and then you could throw them in with the Hypercrypt Legion if you wanted to, but I personally don't. I'd rather go with Wraiths. But guys, what do you do with your Skorpekh Lord and your Destroyers? Also, keep your eyes open for the next community poll for another Refresher review. So yeah, guys, I'll see you in the next one.